You know, for a 300-year-old fraternity, we don't often get the opportunity to talk breaking news, but we have breaking Masonic news, and we're going to talk about it here on the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry channel. As I film this, today is Wednesday, December 17th, and what you're about to watch was actually filmed yesterday morning with Brother Art de Hoyos and myself. It's a conversation about a news story concerning Freemasonry out of Great Britain. Since we had that conversation, there has been an update to the story. So first, check out the conversation between Art and myself about a story coming out of Great Britain concerning Freemasonry, and then stay tuned at the end for the latest information. Welcome to the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry channel. I'm Maynard Edwards, 33rd degree, along with our Grand Archivist, Grand Historian, Brother Arturo de Hoyos, 33rd degree, Grand Cross. On this channel, we talk about Freemasonry, symbols, philosophy, history, and today, breaking news, which is very odd, and I want to talk the story, so let's make sure we get the story right first.
This just in.
This comes from the BBC. Metropolitan Police must reveal membership of Freemasons is the headline from the BBC. Officers in the Metropolitan Police must tell bosses if they are a member or ever have been a member of the Freemasons. The force has now announced the group has been added to the Met's declarable associations policy, along with other, quote, hierarchical organizations. Say that 3 times fast. Wow. That's tricky. The Freemasons, one of the world's oldest social and charitable organizations, sees members pledge loyalty to the fraternity's principles and other mutual support to each other. The move was recommended by the Daniel Morgan Independent Panel, a probe into the force's handling of an unsolved murder from 1987 of private detective Daniel Morgan. And it goes on to tell that story. But basically, if you're a police officer in Great Britain and you are a Freemason or ever have been a Freemason, you have to disclose that. Now, the Grand Lodge of England has basically said they don't like this policy. These are their quotes: unlawful, unfair, and discriminatory. What do you think?
Well, there's a history, of course, with, registration is usually followed by something like confiscation or prohibition. So that's the first step.
True. But let's take and I'm going to play devil's advocate here because I tend to agree with you. We work here at the House of the Temple. This is a not-profit organization. We have to disclose if we are members of other organizations that may have a conflicting interest with this organization, because that's just part and parcel of working for a nonprofit in the United States of America. Is this ruling necessarily different?
I think it is. I don't see that there's any inherent conflict of interest in Freemasonry. This reminds me very much of, what was the name of that fellow that wrote Stephen Knight. Remember that? About 41 years ago, he wrote a book called The Brotherhood in England, and he made many of the same types of charges. The police in England are corrupt, they're all Freemasons, but that kind of went away.
Well, that trope, that idea that there's a secret group working below the law to manipulate things for certain people, that's everything from the book you mentioned, The Brotherhood, to The Blacklist with James Spader.
Right.
The whole idea that there's this group subverting the rest of us, and that a lot of times Masons get lumped in with that, and there's just no proof.
Yeah, but the notion that that you can't belong to an organization that has private affairs about it without it being nefarious is simply ludicrous.
Oh, it's absolutely ludicrous.
You're arguing from the assumption that if they're doing something private, it must be bad.
But that is why I avoid the word secret when talking about Freemasonry. And I know that the word secretary is born from secret and all those things, but to me, secret does have some nefarious connotation to it in the modern era. Private, your PIN number is private. Your social security number is private. What goes on in your bedroom is private. It's not really a secret. We all have it. We all know what it does, but it's private.
Yeah, I prefer private and confidential.
So do you view this as something that will be harmful to the craft in England and maybe have ramifications for the rest of us?
I think it can be abused. I think it'd be ludicrous to assume that people who simply belong to an association are going to have a preferred favoritism. Let's say that we're both stamp collectors. If the judge is a stamp collector, is he going to let that guy off because he's a stamp collector? Or if he belongs to AAA, is he going to let that motorcycle, guy who committed, passing a lane or something, is he going to let him off? Do you remember who Jonathan Blanchard was? Mm-mm. He was one of the most famous anti-Masons of the 1800s. He wrote several exposés with the Ezra Cook Company, including Scott's Rite, Masonry Illustrated. And in volume 1, he tells the story of a rebel who supposedly murdered it might have been a Union soldier or a Union neighbor, something like this, for $2,000 or something like this, and then sought help from a person who was a Mason. And in response, the Mason said, I love the line, he says, "You infamous puppy, you want me to abuse my Masonry like that?" So even Blanchard was aware that, that Masonry in and of itself did not make somebody corruptible, that there was no inherent nature in it that would make you favor somebody's crimes just because they're a Mason. Pike says very clearly in Morals and Dogma that Masonic obligations do not have a requirement to conceal anything illegal, and we know that. There's a lot of symbolism in Masonry, but really, committing crime and using the Brotherhood as an excuse to cover it, that's just not real. We've seen recent examples here in the United States of where Masonry has had to take care of certain brothers who have strayed, so we do have that internal mechanism, that we apply. If a brother goes too far in some way or the other, or goes outside of the bounds of what Masonry considers to be proper, we'll suspend or expel those people.
It happens all but every day.
That's right. It's happened with Grand Masters.
Sure, a Mason commits a crime of some kind, having nothing to do with the fraternity. Maybe something as simple as a DUI, which is awful. I don't want to, downplay the seriousness of that crime, but it's one of those things that it happens, and they get tossed out for that.
They do.
They do. It happens all the time. To say nothing of other crimes that might be out there. If it's found out that a Mason has committed that, he's pretty much gone. The Grand Lodge just. Bang, done.
I know of a case where a brother was expelled for petty theft.
Yeah, so. It does happen. So, but I guess I don't necessarily see the issue with disclosing that to your association, to your employer, only because, here in this building, my previous career as a radio and TV host, we had to disclose all of those things to make sure that, not that there was any hint of impropriety or anything of the sort, but just so that everybody knows what the deal is. Everybody's informed.
At the same time, I think if there are people that have prejudices against Masons, you think about things in history where groups of people, some countries perhaps, started amassing lists of people. Good things did not follow that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and obviously Art's being a little coy, but I don't know that a lot of people know that Masons were rounded up by the Germans during the Second World War.
Right.
They were placed in camps alongside the Jewish folks and Jehovah's Witnesses and other groups they considered to be subversive. I guess the concern in Great Britain is we've seen some attacks on free speech in Great Britain, and I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole and talk politics at all, but here in the United States, obviously we have a First Amendment that protects our freedoms in an all but absolute manner, and they don't have that.
That's right. We're fortunate that we have certain protections in this country, and again, we're not going to badmouth any other country.
No.
They have their governments.
It's different.
And rightly so.
Yes.
It's different from ours, but we enjoy protections here in the States that are not enjoyed elsewhere.
Thanks to Brother Arturo de Hoyos, our Grand Archivist and Grand Historian, for sharing his opinions on that news story coming out of Great Britain regarding the fact, again, that if you're a Freemason and you're going to be a Metropolitan Police officer, you have to disclose your Masonic membership, or if you've ever been a Mason. And the Masons have said this is kind of unfair to be singled out this way. And it's unfair enough that now here is an update to the story. As I mentioned at the top of the video, the Freemasons are actually planning on filing a lawsuit against the Metropolitan Police Department. They have issued a formal letter before claim. So in Great Britain, before they can just launch into a lawsuit, you have to give the other side notice that you're planning on suing them, and this is done through a formal letter. And this is to try and keep the court systems from getting too clogged up with things that could be resolved another way. So the governing bodies of several Masonic organizations have issued a letter before claim challenging this disclosure rule. So the disclosure policy, which was announced on the 11th of December, just a couple of days ago, requires Med officers and staff to declare any past or present membership in organizations that are, and this is their quote, hierarchical in nature, have confidential membership, or require members to support and protect each other, explicitly naming Freemasonry. In the letter that they filed announcing their plans to sue, the United Grand Lodge of England, alongside the Order of Women Freemasons and the Honorable Fraternity of Ancient Masons, calls the action unlawful, unfair, and discriminatory, and says that consultation was wholly inadequate, prejudicial, and unjust. The UGLE also goes on to say that the Metropolitan Police Department's wording about members being required to, quote, support and protect each other is misleading. And that's absolutely true. As Art and I had in our previous discussion, there's nothing in any Masonic obligation that says we have to break the law for one another. That's not any part of any Masonic obligation. They go on to say that the stated qualification, the support is moral within one's ability and never at the expense to the, quote, duty of law. So they are specifically admitting that there is no Masonic obligation that says we have to violate the law or that we should violate the law in any circumstance. The Metropolitan Police Department says it's acting for transparency, and they are doing this based on consultation that they got, and they state that public and staff confidence must take precedence over the secrecy of any membership organization. See, I don't view Masonry as being secret. Again, this goes back to the conversation Art and I just had. Masonry has some elements about it that are private. It's not secret. Secret has this nefarious connotation. I do want to be clear about one thing with regard to the Metropolitan Police Department's position on this policy and why it has come about. The Metropolitan Police Department are making this policy change based on a recommendation from the Daniel Morgan Independent Panel. This is a panel that was put together to investigate the mishandling of a murder investigation of a man named Daniel Morgan. He was murdered in 1987. No one has been brought to justice for this man's murder yet. And the reason that people think that no one has been brought to justice is because of police corruption and police mishandling of the case. In this investigation done by this independent panel, they specifically state they did not see evidence that Masonic channels were corruptly used to subvert the investigation. However, for some reason, despite having no evidence of that fact, they are still recommending that anyone who is a Freemason be forced to disclose that. The problem with it is that it's unfair to single out Freemasonry. If you're going to do that, then every Greek letter organization has to be disclosed. Every church that you're a member of has to be disclosed. I realize that's making the slippery slope argument, but it has to be evenly applied for all. Now, of course, I'm talking about US law, and British law is obviously a little bit different. So we'll have to see how this lawsuit plays out. There are likely to be updates to this story in the coming days, so make sure you're subscribed to our channel for the latest.